I want to tell you a story. It will change the way you understand simple things. This story doesn't begin with grand events or crashing thunder. It starts with a whisper, the kind that lives inside all of us, but that we so rarely hear. Once, in a small village nestled among rolling hills, there lived a man named Ivan. He wasn't old, but he wasn't young either. He wasn't rich, but he wasn't poor. His days flowed quietly like the stream that murmured behind his modest home. But one evening, as the sun sank below the horizon and silence wrapped the world in its gentle arms, Ivan heard something strange. It wasn't the wind rustling the trees or the creak of his wooden porch. It was a voice, his own voice. And it said, "Who will you become tomorrow?" Now, I won't rush this tale because life, my friends, doesn't rush either. It moves slowly, step by step, and every step is a choice. Ivan sat down at his old wooden table, lit a lamp, and stared into the flickering flame. He didn't know where that question had come from, but it hooked itself into his soul like a fisherman's line snagging a branch. "Who will you become tomorrow?" he repeated aloud, and the words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. He began to think about his life. The years spent tending fields, the neighbors he greeted with nothing more than a nod, the quiet evenings that blended into one another like shadows at dusk. You see, most of us live this way, moving through our days without asking why. But the mind, that quiet companion we carry, is always working. It plants seeds we don't even notice, and those seeds grow into the lives we lead. Ivan had never thought much about tomorrow. Tomorrow was just another day to wake, to work, to sleep. But that night, as the flame danced before his eyes, he felt something shift. It was as if the question had opened a door inside him, a door he hadn't known was there. He rose from his chair and stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky a deep velvet scattered with stars. He looked up and wondered for the first time in years what lay beyond the hills. Ivan was a simple man, but simplicity doesn't mean emptiness. Every life, no matter how quiet, holds a question waiting to be asked. And as he stood there breathing in the night, he realized something. His thoughts had always been with him, shaping him, guiding him, even when he wasn't listening. Every sigh of frustration at a stubborn plow, every fleeting wish for something more, they weren't just passing moments. They were threads in a tapestry he hadn't yet seen. The wise among us know this truth. You become what you think about most of the time. Ivan didn't know it yet, but that night under the stars, a seed was planted. Not in the soil of his fields, but in the soil of his mind. And seeds, my friends, are patient. They wait for the right moment to break through the earth and reach for the sun. Ivan went back inside, blew out the lamp, and lay down to sleep. But as he closed his eyes, the voice whispered again, "Who will you become tomorrow?" He didn't have an answer, not yet, but for the first time he wanted one. That night, Ivan dreamed. He saw himself standing in a vast field, not the one he knew, but a place endless and golden stretching beyond the horizon. And in the distance, there was a figure, a shadow moving toward him. He couldn't see its face, but he felt its presence, heavy with meaning. As the figure drew closer, Ivan's heart began to pound. Who was it? What did it want? Just as the shadow reached out a hand, Ivan woke with a start, the first light of dawn creeping through his window. His breath was quick, his mind racing. The dream had ended, but the question remained, and now it wouldn't let him go. Have you ever woken from a dream so vivid that it felt more real than the world around you? That's how Ivan began his day. The golden field, the shadowy figure, the outstretched hand, they lingered in his mind like echoes of a song he'd never heard before. He rose from his bed, the wooden floor cold beneath his feet, and stepped into the pale light of morning. The village was still asleep, wrapped in a hush that seemed to hold its breath. But Ivan felt different. Something had stirred within him, something he couldn't name. As he stood by the stream behind his house, watching the water ripple over smooth stones, he asked himself, was that dream a message or just a trick of the night? Life, my friends, has a way of speaking to us through quiet moments. We rush past them chasing the noise of our days, but they wait patiently, ready to teach us if we'll only listen. Ivan filled a bucket from the stream and carried it back to his small garden. He watered the rows of carrots and potatoes, his hands moving as they always did, but his thoughts were elsewhere. That question from the night before, "Who will you become tomorrow?" had taken root, and now the dream had watered it, coaxing it to grow. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow, and looked at his reflection in the bucket's still water. What he saw wasn't just a face, it was a question staring back. You see, the mind is a mirror. It shows us what we choose to see, what we dwell on most. Ivan had spent years thinking of little beyond the next task, the next season. His thoughts had been small, practical, safe, and so his life had become small, practical, safe. But that morning, as he gazed into the water, he wondered, what if he'd been looking at the wrong reflection all along? What if his thoughts could show him something more? He set the bucket down and sat on the grass, letting the sun warm his face. For the first time, he began to notice his own mind, not just the surface, but the currents beneath. Ivan thought of his father, a man of few words who'd worked the same fields until his hands were rough as the earth itself. "Life is what it is," his father used to say. Ivan had accepted that, lived it, believed it, but now that belief felt like a chain. He thought of the merchant who passed through the village each spring, a man with bright eyes and tales of distant cities. Ivan had envied him once, but only briefly. Envy was a thought he'd never fed. And he thought of Anna, the baker's daughter, whose laughter used to fill the air like music. He'd loved her years ago, but he'd never spoken. That thought, too, he'd buried. Why? Because it was easier to stay quiet, to stay small. The wise know this. Every thought you nurture shapes the path you walk. Ivan had nurtured thoughts of routine, of limits, and so his life had followed. But as he sat there, a new thought crept in. What if he could choose differently? What if he could think of possibility, of courage, of something beyond the hills? It was a fragile idea, like a seedling pushing through hard soil, but it was there. He stood, brushed the dirt from his knees, and walked back to the house. The day unfolded as it always did, feeding the chickens, mending a fence, but his mind was no longer asleep. It was awake, questioning, searching. That evening, Ivan sat by his lamp again, the flame casting shadows on the walls. He picked up a small, worn book his father had left him, a collection of proverbs, nothing grand. He opened it at random and read, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he." The words struck him like a bell ringing in the distance. He read them again, slowly, letting them sink in. Was it that simple? Could his thoughts truly shape who he was, who he would become? He closed the book and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The idea felt too big, too strange, yet it fit the puzzle of his dream, the voice, the restlessness growing inside him. And then, as the night deepened, something happened. Ivan heard a knock at his door. He froze. No one visited at this hour, not in this quiet village. He rose, his heart thudding, and opened the door. There stood the merchant, the one with the bright eyes, his cloak dusted with the road. "Ivan," the man said, his voice low, "I need your help." Before Ivan could ask why, the merchant stepped inside, pulling a folded map from his bag. "I found something," he whispered, "something that could change everything." Ivan's breath caught. The map trembled in the merchant's hands, and in the dim light, Ivan saw a single word scrawled across it: tomorrow. Imagine a single word holding the weight of your entire life. That's what Ivan felt as he stared at the map, the word tomorrow, scrawled in rough ink across its worn surface. The merchant stood before him, his bright eyes glinting in the lamplight, his breath quick with excitement or fear, perhaps both. Ivan's small home, once a haven of routine, now felt like a stage where something vast was about to unfold. "What is this?" Ivan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The merchant smiled, but it was a smile edged with mystery. "It's a chance," he said, "a chance to see what you could be. Life, my friends, often comes to us in disguise. It knocks on our door not with trumpets, but with quiet invitations we can choose to accept or ignore." Ivan hesitated. He wasn't a man of chances, he was a man of certainties, of soil and seasons. Yet the map drew him in, its lines curling like rivers he'd never crossed, its edges frayed as if it had been carried through storms. The merchant unfolded it on the table, smoothing it with care. "I found it in a market far from here," he said. "An old woman sold it to me, said it belonged to a man who became what he dreamed. She told me to give it to someone ready to listen." Ivan traced a finger along the map's winding paths. It wasn't a map of places he knew. No villages, no hills he recognized. Instead, it showed strange landmarks. A tower labeled Courage, a forest called Doubt, a river named Choice. Each name carried a weight, a whisper of meaning. The wise among us understand that our thoughts are maps too, charts we draw without realizing, guiding us toward what we dwell on most. Ivan had mapped his life with thoughts of sameness, and so his world had stayed small. But this was different. This was a map of the mind. The merchant sat across from him, his voice low and steady. "I've followed it part way," he said. "The Tower of Courage, it's real. I stood there, felt something shift inside me, but I can't go further alone. I need someone steady, someone who knows how to plant seeds and wait." Ivan looked up, startled. "Me?" he asked. The merchant nodded. "You're not as small as you think, Ivan. Your life's been quiet, but quiet men carry deep rivers." Those words struck Ivan like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples through his soul. He thought of the dream again, the golden field, the shadow reaching out. Was this what it meant? Was the merchant the figure, the map, the hand? He didn't know, but he felt the pull of it, the way a root feels the tug of water beneath the earth. "What do I do with it?" he asked. The merchant leaned closer. "Think about it, that's all. Think about where it leads, what it promises. The map doesn't move you, your mind does." Ivan frowned, turning the idea over like a plow turns soil. Could a thought carry him somewhere new? Could it build a bridge beyond the hills? The night stretched on as they talked. The merchant spoke of his travels, of cities where men built towers to the sky, of markets alive with voices, of a world Ivan had only glimpsed in passing wishes. And with every story, Ivan's thoughts shifted. He began to see himself not just as a farmer, but as a man who could choose. The wise know this. What you think about grows, and what you ignore fades. Ivan had ignored possibility for years, but now it sat across from him, speaking in a merchant's voice, unfolding in a merchant's map. As dawn approached, the merchant stood. "Keep it," he said, pushing the map toward Ivan. "I'll return in 3 days. If you're ready, we'll go together." He stepped into the gray light and was gone, leaving Ivan alone with the map and a mind buzzing like a hive. Ivan sat there, staring at the word tomorrow. He didn't know what it meant, not yet, but he felt its power. He folded the map and tucked it under his pillow, then went about his day. He fed the chickens, hoed the garden, mended the fence. But every task was different now, colored by a question: what if? That night, Ivan dreamed again. He stood at the edge of a forest, the forest of doubt. He knew it from the map. The trees were tall, their branches woven tight, blocking the sky. He took a step forward, then another, the air thick with whispers. "You can't," they said, "you're not enough." His chest tightened, his feet faltered, but then, from somewhere deep, a new thought rose. What if I am? He pushed through the trees, and just as he broke into a clearing, he saw it, a bridge spanning a rushing river. On its arch was carved Choice. He reached for it, heart pounding, and woke to the sound of his own voice shouting, "Yes!" What if the loudest voice in your life isn't the one you hear, but the one you ignore? Ivan woke with that shout still ringing in his ears. Yes! A word he hadn't meant to say, yet it spilled from him like water breaking a dam. The morning was crisp, the village stirring with the cluck of chickens and the creak of carts. But Ivan's world felt different. He'd crossed a bridge in his dream, a bridge called Choice, and now he stood on the edge of something new. He pulled the map from under his pillow, its creases soft from his touch, and traced the river's winding line. Today, he thought, I'll decide. Life, my friends, is a river. It flows whether we guide it or not, carrying us along its currents. But every so often, it offers us a bridge, a moment to choose our direction. Ivan dressed slowly, his hands steady but his mind alive with questions. The merchant would return in 2 days, expecting an answer. "If you're ready, Saul," he'd said, we'll go together." Ready for what? Ivan didn't know, but he felt the weight of it, the pull of a life beyond the fields. He stepped outside, the sun climbing over the hills, and walked to the stream behind his house. There he sat on a flat stone and watched the water dance. You see, the mind is both the map and the traveler. What we think becomes the path we take, and Ivan was beginning to understand this. He thought of the forest of doubt in his dream, those whispering trees that tried to hold him back. How often had he listened to them in waking life? "You're just a farmer," they'd said. "This is all you'll ever be." But last night he'd answered with a new thought. What if I am enough? That question had carried him to the bridge, and now it lingered, a quiet flame in his chest. He dipped his hands in the stream, the cold biting his skin, and smiled. Choice wasn't a gift given, it was a gift claimed. Ivan spent the day in motion, but his thoughts were his true work. As he repaired a gate, he wondered what courage might feel like, not the merchant's courage of travel, but his own. As he pulled weeds from the garden, he pictured the tower on the map, its stones rising against the sky. Courage, he murmured, and the word felt solid, like something he could hold. The wise know this. Every thought you repeat builds something real. Ivan had built a life of habit with years of small thoughts, but now he was laying new stones, one idea at a time. By afternoon, he walked to the village square. Children played near the well, their laughter bright against the hum of daily life. Ivan watched them, remembering his own boyhood, dreams of adventure he'd let fade. He saw Anna there too, kneading dough outside the bakery, her hands dusted with flour. She glanced up, caught his eye, and smiled. A small, familiar smile. Ivan's heart stirred. Years ago, he'd thought of speaking to her, of asking her to walk with him by the stream, but he'd chosen silence instead, and that choice had shaped his solitude. What if he chose differently now? He nodded to her and turned away, the thought taking root. That evening, Ivan sat with the map again, the lamp casting its glow across the table. He studied the river of choice, its path splitting into two, one flowing toward a valley called Peace, the other toward a mountain labeled Struggle. Which would he take? Peace sounded safe, familiar, but struggle called to him, promising something more. He closed his eyes, letting his mind wander. The merchant's words echoed. The map doesn't move you, your mind does. Ivan realized then that the choice wasn't about the map, it was about what he wanted to become. Did he want peace or did he want growth? The question hung heavy, unanswered. As night fell, Ivan stepped outside to breathe the cool air. The stars were sharp, the village quiet. He thought of his father who'd chosen peace and lived a steady life. He thought of the merchant who'd chosen struggle and seen the world. Both had become what they thought about most. Ivan's thoughts had been a mix of both, safety and longing, but now he had to choose one. He went back inside, lay down, and drifted into sleep, the map beside him. In his dream, he stood at the river's fork, the water rushing past. He took a step toward struggle, then hesitated. A voice, not his own, whispered, "Choose wisely, for you'll live it." He woke to a sound, a soft tapping at his window. Heart racing, he rose and peered out. There, in the faint moonlight, stood Anna, her face pale but resolute. "Ivan," she said through the glass, "I heard the merchant was just now. I need to talk to you." Ivan opened the window, his breath catching. "He's leaving tomorrow," she said, "and he asked about you. What will you do?" The night seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his answer. What if the moment you've waited for arrives not with a shout, but with a whisper through a window? Ivan stood there, the cool night air brushing his face as Anna's words hung between them like a thread waiting to be pulled. "He's leaving tomorrow," she said again, her voice steady but her eyes searching his. "What will you do?" The merchant had come early, 2 days ahead of his promise, and now Ivan's choice loomed closer than the stars above. He felt the map beneath his pillow, its edges pressing into his thoughts, and realized that this wasn't just about a journey. It was about who he'd become. Life, my friends, doesn't always give us time to prepare. It hands us moments, small, fragile things, and asks us to hold them with care or let them slip away. Ivan stepped back, motioning Anna inside. She hesitated, then climbed through the window, her flour-dusted apron catching faintly on the sill. She stood in his small room, the lamplight softening her features, and Ivan saw her not just as the baker's daughter, but as a mirror of his own unspoken dreams. "Why are you here?" he asked gently. She looked down, then met his gaze. "Because I've seen you changing," she said, "and I don't want you to leave without knowing." You see, the mind doesn't work alone. It reflects the world we let in. Ivan had spent years thinking solitary thoughts, but now Anna stood before him, a living echo of what he'd buried. He pulled a chair for her and they sat across from the map, its creases glowing in the dim light. "The merchant came to the bakery tonight," she began. He said he's heading to the mountain tomorrow. Struggle, he called it. He asked if you'd join him. I told him I didn't know, but I had to find out. Ivan's chest tightened. The fork in his dream, the river splitting toward peace or struggle, suddenly felt real, its current tugging at him. He unfolded the map, showing her the paths. "This is what he gave me," he said. "It's not just a place, it's a choice." Anna traced the mountain's jagged outline with her finger. "Struggle," she murmured. "Why would anyone choose that?" Ivan leaned back, the question settling deep. "Because peace is what I've always had," he said, "and it's kept me still." The wise know this. What you think about most shapes not just your days, but your soul. Ivan had thought of safety, and it had built him a quiet life. But now struggle called, a chance to grow, to stretch beyond the hills. Anna watched him, her silence heavy with understanding. "I used to dream of leaving," she said at last. "When I was young, I wanted to see the cities, hear the music of the world. But I stayed. I chose peace because it was easier." Her voice softened. "You're braver than I was, Ivan." Those words landed like seeds in fresh soil. Brave? He'd never thought of himself that way. Yet here he was, holding a map to somewhere new, feeling the stir of courage he'd glimpsed in the tower of his dreams. He looked at Anna, her eyes bright with something unspoken, and wondered what thoughts had shaped her. The night stretched on as they talked, not of maps or merchants, but of the lives they'd lived. Anna spoke of her father, who'd taught her to bake, of the joy she found in simple things. Ivan shared his father's proverbs, his quiet fields, the restlessness he'd ignored. Each story was a thread, weaving them closer, and Ivan realized something. His thoughts weren't just his own anymore. They were growing toward her, toward connection. The wise know this too. What you share with others becomes part of what you are. He'd chosen solitude for years, but now, with Anna across from him, he saw another path. As dawn neared, Anna stood. "I should go," she said, "but I'll be watching tomorrow. Whatever you choose, Ivan, I hope it's yours." She slipped out the window, leaving him with the map and a mind buzzing with possibility. He lay down, the lamp extinguished, and closed his eyes. In his dream, he stood at the river again, the fork clear before him. This time, he stepped toward struggle, the mountain rising sharp and tall. The path was steep, the wind fierce, but he climbed. At the peak, he turned and saw not just the village below, but Anna waiting by the stream, her face lifted toward him. He woke to the sound of footsteps. The merchant was back, his cloak damp with morning dew, standing at the open door. "It's time," he said, his voice firm. "The mountain waits. Are you coming?" Ivan's heart raced, the map in his hand, Anna's words in his ears. He opened his mouth to answer, but before he could, a shout echoed from the village square, a cry of alarm that shattered the stillness.